Small step for man, giant leap for mankind.
Let's go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the UnFuckIt Discussion. We're going to get into some interesting shit today. I had a couple of moments today. Hold on, I'm just going to mute a couple of people here because we've got some feedback going on. We're going to talk geomagnetics again. And I've dragged Jules up in the middle of the night. Sorry, Jules. So we might get into a little bit of astrology on this one. And we're going to possibly, Ben's here, we're going to throw him into the mix because he's got some shit to bring forward. There's some weird fucking shit going on. There's some weird shit going on geomagnetically. I could say weather-wise, in case you haven't noticed. But there's some interesting pieces coming out right now. There's some interesting pieces. So I think it was Ben pulled up a book that looks like it was written in, I'd say, the late 1940s. And it's about weather prediction. But a lot of the information in it is from the late 1800s, the early 1900s. And oh, wouldn't you know it, these guys were actually onto fucking something. They had this shit figured out. Electric universe, magnetic fields, etc. In the planetary alignment. So we're going to get into this. We're going to get, Ben, make sure you send me that link privately so that I don't lose it, because I definitely want to take a look at that. One of the things that comes up in this book is, Ben just posted a link to something about Galileo, is the fact that Francis Bacon and Galileo were both on the trail to figure this shit out, but because the rest of the scientists at the time went, poo-poo, you must be wrong. And if they'd actually listened to Galileo and Francis Bacon, guess what? We would have already probably had this shit figured out by now, because they were on the right track. They had already kind of got major pieces in place. I put out a note. I really tried hard tonight to get Maverick Star out of the UK. Tried to get him on the show tonight, even if it was just for 10-15 minutes. If you guys don't know, he has a website called, Nancy, help me, it's Pole Shift News. Is it Pole Shift News, or is it just, I think it's Pole Shift News.
It's magnetic. No, that might be diamonds. I'm thinking magnetic reversals and pole shift.
I know.
It's Maverick Star Reloaded, isn't it?
I know. He has a YouTube channel called Maverick Star. Hold on, let me just got it here. Pulling this up so I can see Maverick Star Reloaded. Let me see what his website is called. I'll let you guys know. Oh, and I'm sorry, guys, I can't show you the shit because my internet has been so bad today. Everything is crashing. My computer's crashing, so I daren't even open a single page right now. Anyways, Maverick Star has been doing, he does geomagnetic readings. And he has been making magnometers and sending them all over the planet. And getting his viewers to take on these magnometers and so they're now set like basically all over Northern Europe, Northern North America, down in Australia, down in South America, to take readings of the magnetic fields, because he's been watching, and of course his overwhelming, the gist of his site is the fact that he's looking at a magnetic field reversal going to happen. He has put some of the best information out, regardless if you don't agree with his conclusions. He's put out some of the best information because he has simplified things down. He's taken things that we've heard about, for example, once the magnetic North Pole hits 40 degrees, that's it. Everyone keeps saying this. Well, he actually pulled together magnets and on video showed why 40 degrees is that magical number, if you will, when you start talking about magnetic fields. Once the north hits 40 degrees, the magnetic north, everything flips. It goes whoop and does a complete 180. So he's got some really good information. Now, because he watches these magnometers so closely, he put out a video this week. I will make sure, I'm sorry guys, losing my voice already. I will make sure that I put these 2 videos of his, the links to them with the archive that will go with this video. What he's talking about is that magnetic north did a major fucking shift this past month. Major, like unprecedented, unheard of, insane movement. Now, I'm not going to play the video because I can't, like I said, unfortunately. What I can do is show you some of the clips from the video. Bear with me, guys. I don't think we're going to be able to play it, but we'll give it a try anyways. Okay, so this is, if you will, the magnometer readings. And I know it's a bunch of squiggles. What I'm going to point out to you is this. If you look over here, you see how it's just very up, down, up, down, up, down, very nice and small like that. That is more along the lines of what is normal. In the last month, we had this happen. First, it shot down. So it hovers between 10 and 11. Okay? It shot down to 7. Then it shot up to 13. Since then, it has been bouncing back and forth between 10, 11, and 13, almost reaching 14 in certain spots. This is like not normal. Like so not normal as to not even be close to normal. Now, one of the things he showed is, and I'm going to fast forward this. Here we go. This is the map he put out because he wanted to show people degrees, because degrees doesn't mean something. You say it went from these degrees to this degree, it really is not something most of us can grasp in a visual way. So he put it on a map. And he mapped it out and he showed this change of degrees. Okay, basically here in 2019 is where we were. Magnetic north at the beginning of the month bounced all the way back to almost 2015 readings, and then bounced forward and beyond what it was. So this is 250 miles. That's how far magnetic north moved this month. 250 miles. This is like, wow. Now, bringing this up, like I said, I was hoping I could get him to come on to discuss some of this stuff. There you go. Nancy's just put up, it's poleshiftnews.com. There we go. That's his website. Okay. Yes, it is. Jules, it's real. It went real close to the 40-degree mark. Okay. Now, as I always say, because I gather pieces, and we have a whole pile of us, UnFuckers out there gathering pieces, and you see one anomaly like this, and you might say, oh, well, it could just be an anomaly. It's just something fluky, right? Except that this month we've actually seen quite a few of those. Now, in April, we had the guy, and I put up the video, and I put it in the UnFuckers room, and the guy freaking out because his magnetic compass, proper physical, not a GPS on a phone, and his compass north switched to south while he was watching, and he did the video, and I was like, okay, put the call out. Everyone, like, has anyone seen these kind of anomalies with proper magnetic compasses? Well, that's taken a lot of people have been watching these things. And we have a pile of people who are putting information and going, yeah, my compass is off by like 6 degrees today. 7 degrees, 10 degrees. People are looking and they're saying, okay, my north is now pointing northeast. We're getting, and not just, so that's Canada. I had some of these readings came from New Zealand. So we're talking, okay, southern hemisphere. I had a friend in New Zealand who's like, oh, my compass is like all over the fucking place. It's doing this day to day. Like north is going like this day to day. So we know shit is going on. We know there's something magnetically taking place. Now, there was a couple of interesting articles this week. And again, I don't have them loaded. I'm really sorry, guys. Two of them mainstream. One of them talking about changes on Jupiter. One of them talking about changes on Saturn. And if you take all of the bullshit mainstream science puke, throw it out, one of the things that they're talking about is there's a magnetic hotspot on one of these planets that's growing right at the equatorial region, and they can't really understand why it's doing that. It's this odd magnetic spot. I'm like, oh, you mean like the South Atlantic anomaly that we have here on Earth that now planes can't fly over because for fear that it's going to totally fuck their GPS if they even fly over the South Atlantic anomaly? You mean that kind of an equatorial magnetic hotspot that's just randomly appeared on our planet too? So we've got these little bits. They just keep feeding them out to us. Little hints around the edges. Now, again, you guys know the feeds that I use to watch the magnetic fields, to watch the magnetopause, the magnetosphere. They're up and down like a yo-yo. No change. It's like they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off. You go to get information. Oh, they've disappeared again. 6 hours, 8 hours. It comes back. Now in the magnetopause, we are seeing absolutely, and for about a month and a half, little over a month, freaky things. The magnetopause, where we're seeing, here's Earth, here's the sun, and we're seeing blasts coming in and lighting up the backside of our magnetosphere. Well, wait. How can that be? How under mainstream accepted scientific theory, it's not possible. And yet we're seeing it happen. Oh, and then of course the feeds go down for a day or two while they try and scrub it all out and erase it. We've got all this stuff going on. The weather anomalies have gotten crazier again in May. Here in Malta, we finally had spring. Spring seems to have finally arrived in Malta. It was actually like yesterday was the first day I went out grocery shopping in like a cotton dress and a pair of flip-flops without a jacket. It was the 21st of Malta, 21st of May. Like, that's insane. We should be hardcore summer weather by now. Colorado had snow last night. Again, we got areas of northern Ontario that had snow last night. We have ridiculous temperatures being seen all over the planet. We have now a huge storm brewing in the Atlantic Ocean. Months ahead of hurricane season. Months ahead of hurricane season. We have tornadoes ripping through North America, left, right, and center. Months before tornado season. And where are you, Natasha? Natasha says it's snowing at 32 degrees. I'm assuming you mean Fahrenheit. In Utah. Floods everywhere. A serious situation in America right now. And I don't know how bad it is in Canada, in the prairie of Canada and the prairies. But the situation right now in America is going to be not cool. Not good. Because the crops aren't going in. Only 30% of the corn.
There's a wildfire in Canada.
Okay, Earl, just give me a sec. Only 30% of the corn has been planted in the U.S. so far. It should be up to well over 2/3 of the crop should be in already. Less than 1/3 has been planted. And they're saying same thing with wheat, same thing with all the grains. Because of the floods, because of all of these things, The crops aren't going in. Holy shit, Moksha just said US had 130 tornadoes yesterday? Are you shitting me? Holy crap. Holy crap. And as I said, it's not tornado season. This is crazy shit. Now again, we're having wild weather that's happening down all over the place. We're seeing wild weather happen in Australia, in Asia, and Earl was just seeing wildfires in Canada, which I saw as well. Siberia has been on fire for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks. It's like an insane wildfire out in Siberia, Russia at the moment. Okay? Crazy, crazy stuff. Now, it's very obviously, I mean, this is what we talked about last week. We have to look at whatever it is they're not talking about. The distractions are now so insane between the political stuff. And I think one of the biggest indicators of how crazy shit is the level of distractions they're putting out now. That they're now playing the cards that they don't ever want to play. I.e., the abortion card is being played right now. Not just in the US. Poland, Romania, all kinds of European countries. This abortion card is all of a sudden, boom. And it's making the population, whether you're for or against, pro-life, pro-choice, doesn't even matter. Everyone is just like, holy shit. Because it has just been pushed and pumped out there at such a level. The laws are being pushed in the US so fast. Oh, kind of like the mandatory vaccine laws? All of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom, mandatory vaccine. Same thing. Had the same kind of reaction. Huge emotional reaction from people, whether you were pro or against vaccines. Didn't matter which side of the fence you were on. Everyone was immediately on fire. It was like consumed with it. We have the piles of nuclear war shit being pulled out right now. Like they're playing the nuclear war card. In England, we talked about one of the articles out of the UK last week. They're throwing that word around. Oh, nuclear war. We have the Iran stuff. We have the Iran shit going on. Now, in America, it's all Iran's going to attack us. Yeah, dudes. I made a really sarcastic post. Got a standing ovation from a couple of Iranians, actually. Saying, let's make a list of all the countries Iran has attacked in the last 200 years. Go. Now let's make a list of all the countries that the U.S. has attacked in the last 20 years. Go. Who do you think is actually doing this? Spain told the U.S., fuck you, we're not having any part of this Iranian shit, and took their navy and went home. We're going home. UK doing the exact same thing. Most of Europe is going, we're not getting involved in this shit. This whole Iran shit, you're on crack. There ain't nothing going on over there. The U.S. is turning it into this big, huge distraction. Bad talking, anyone? Okay, so distraction, mass distractions everywhere. We have political elections coming. Well, the Australians, most of the Australians that I know right now are ready to leave Australia after their election that happened this week. That is complete and utter insanity. I mean, not that we actually believe that elections work or that elections are legitimate. Let's face it, we know that who's going to get into power is whoever gets into power. What happened in Australia? We've got elections. We have the European Union elections coming up. We've got Canadian elections going to be coming up soon. We've got, like, these elections are going on, and it's the same thing. Oh, we have the Brexit shit. Still, oh my God, playing out. Yeah, there you go. The article from Nature, Earth's magnetic field is acting up, and geologists just don't know why. They're too stupid. Can't study some real frickin' science. Distraction, distraction, distraction. And like I said, they're pulling out the big guns now. Like in order to keep the people completely off balance, emotionally and mentally off balance, they're using the big guns. It's not just, this candidate arguing against this candidate, or there's this kind of squabble going over here. Mandatory vaccines, abortion laws, and nuclear war being tossed around in the news. Okay? So, massive push of all this stuff. What are they not talking about? Has anyone in the U.S., has a single meteorologist in the U.S. explained how it is that there was over 100 tornadoes in the U.S. yesterday? Has anyone said anything? Has anyone said anything about the fact that there's a hurricane brewing in the Atlantic right now that is a mega hurricane? Was it 3 months before hurricane season? Is anyone talking about it? No, they're not. They're not. Is anyone talking about the floods? Is anyone talking about, again, the lightning strikes? Again, this week, 120,000 lightning strikes in Europe in a 2-hour time frame. I think that was 4 days ago or 5 days ago. 120,000 lightning strikes in just over 2 hours. There's snow in fucking Italy last week. Hail in Spain. This is the Mediterranean, folks. This shit doesn't happen in May in the Mediterranean. This is where everyone comes to get warm, not be pelted with ice balls and freeze to death. So we have this shit going on. And it's the one thing to me, over and over again, when I sit there and try and go, what's the one thing they're not talking about? They're not talking about the weather. And when they do talk the magnetic anomalies, which they kind of have to because they're now so huge, you have to say something. It's the elephant in the room. Because basically, if you're a pilot, if you're an air traffic controller, if you're in anything to do with meteorology, if you're in any kind of industry that has anything to do with magnetic fields, you're seeing this shit. You have to know that this shit is going on. So they have to make comments about, oh, the magnetic fields seem to be all over the place, but we don't know why. Okay, so this is interesting. So, Ben, if you don't mind, I want to talk about that book that I'm pretty sure, Ben, I think it was you who found that book. Jules posted it into our discussion room. This book is from, there's not a proper date on it, but judging from the way it's written and how, and the dates that are given in the book, I'd say somewhere between 1945 and 1950 is when this book was published. And it is called Long Range Weather Forecasting. It's out of the National Library of Australia. Now, the reason why this book is amazing is, number one, is it talks about all this information from the 1800s. The early 1900s, the 1800s, where these guys, they're talking about it. These guys were on it. They were figuring the shit out. They were figuring the cycles out. Oh, what is the major thing that was affecting these cycles? The planets. It wasn't just Earth and the Sun. It was the Earth and the Sun in Saturn, Earth and the Sun in Jupiter. Oh, Uranus plays a fucking huge role in this. And what were the girls talking about on the last astrology show? The biggest thing they were talking about, Uranus, Uranus, Uranus. When Uranus was doing this, this is what we're going to see. These are these guys. These are scientists. Papers written in the 1800s, in the early 1900s. They had already figured it out. And they were looking at the cycles. The biggest problem was, of course, is some of these cycles are 74 years long. So waiting around for the data for the next cycle to, in other words, to confirm their predictions. How many of those scientists were actually around for the next one? So this is the kind of thing that we have going on. Oh, Megan's here too. Awesome. I'm glad. But some of the stuff that they wrote, and I'm going to download the book so that I can upload the PDF into the archive article with this. It's only 28 pages long. It's a little dry on some spots. Ha ha ha, it's a weather paper. It is a bit dry in some spots, but pages 7, 8, 9 is when they're talking about the planetary magnetic fields and the direct effect of these planetary magnetic fields on our planet and how they cause rain or droughts. And it's the combination of these fields. So if you guys want to jump in, if any one of you guys, like Ben, if you want to jump in on this, I'm trying to, the chat is being all screwy on me here today. I'm trying to. Ben,
I kind of don't know really what to say at the moment.
Oh, is it winter there, darling?
It's cold. It's on its way to being winter. Yeah.
You look a bit cold.
Yeah, well, when you sit down, the cool weather as the sun rises, the cool air that creeps in when you're not moving on a computer is, makes you shiver. But there's just so much to consider. See, it's like you were just talking about, mate, who's monitoring the poles.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, remember, it wasn't any more than like maybe 8 months ago that we were talking about how I was sort of mentioning how there should be more than just one pole regardless, and it's not so much a pole, remember? And it came out that there were up to 4, maybe 8
Yep.
poles. So those poles there are the soft magnetic spots, let's say where the skin of the Earth is thinner. So the build-up of whatever it is, the electric field displacing itself off into its dielectric being magnetic, is showing up in those sort of 8 spots. So it would be those 8 spots that you would need to watch, not one particular pole, because those 8 spots are actually going to show where, I don't know, let's just call it the toroid is coming out.
Yeah.
The field is starting to come out, and the same on the southern because they have to meet, right? So there's that side of
track all 4.
Well, see, what I started looking at, which I found really interesting, is so you've got your climate change people, which are basically screaming and crying still about the poles. So the Arctic, and Antarctica.
Yeah.
And yet there's a lot of science coming out now stating like Greenland's glaciers and stuff have started shifting back and have started to grow. And that Antarctica, even though the sea ice is shrinking, it's the actual condensed pack ice is actually more than it has been in like a long time, right? So first and foremost, the Antarctica announcement makes me start wondering what is going on in Antarctica after all the cliff high and all this work that's apparently been going on there, because it would bode that on the land mass itself, it's getting colder, right? More water is freezing and condensing on there. So if that's happening and the sea ice, the ice on the sea is melting, that would say to me that something's moved. The same with Antarctica. Now, if we also notice the things that are going on in North America with these floods and then freezes happening again, and places like where you are in Malta getting hail, and England having massive cold still, and places like where we are now, I mean, it's autumn, so it's getting cold. So I can't sit there and go yada yada, but when we look at like Inigo or Zarkova and those sorts, we know that the temperatures have actually been getting cooler, right?
Yeah.
So we are potentially starting to notice a potential skin shift, like mentioned in the Adam and Eve sort of thing. And the reason, and just quickly, the reason I'm saying this is because one of the arguments is how are they finding 1.2 million year old ice and potentially older on Antarctica? And if you think about the way that the planet actually wobbles, on its kind of thing where we've been talking about its like North Pole Star and that sort of stuff.
Okay, Ben, pause. Was it you who sent me the link to the article that was doing the comparison between the Chan and the Hapgood and saying no, Hapgood was right, Chan is wrong?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to go into. I don't have the link, of course, open.
So, well, it then shows that certain points will always stay frozen.
That was
And
the
then
interesting part about it, is that he showed
Yeah.
that Antarctica was like this, and it wasn't like the poles moved off Antarctica and back, which is what the Chan Adam and Eve one was talking, that it would do a complete shift 90 degrees and back. And the point was the fact of exactly what Ben just said. If the magnetic South Pole moved completely off Antarctica, basically it shifted Antarctica to be the equator, you wouldn't have ice drilling cores that you were finding that are 1 million, 2 million, 3 million years old. And what they looked at it again, and they said, well, if we looked at the stuff that Hapgood wrote about the polar shift, is that it shifts in a certain place, but there's certain areas of Antarctica that would always be in that Antarctic circle where the ice would remain frozen. So you'd have say one area of Antarctica, because it would shift to extreme one side, one area of Antarctica would become nice. It would actually be a good climate for growing and for etc. But that one point would always remain frozen, which is why they were able to find the ice cores that were able to show that these were like 1.5 million years old, that they're continuous ice for 1.5 million years in this one spot.
So just on that exact point, this is where this future predictive weather forecasting and astrological and cosmological meteorology come to play, because the big thing that they talk about is angles. It's not just the planets, it's the angles. And it's the angles that those planets meet either on the sun or on our planet to what actually happens. So when one of the guys that I've been following on Facebook goes by the name Inigo Jones, which is a pseudonym for, an AKA of this guy who's actually written this book that he's talking about. And so he sort of gives out a few rain dates for sort of Australia in general, mainly coastal, because we're coming into this drought season, this low sunspot season, this grand solar minimum cycle. But this weather stuff, this meteorology can come down to very, very like microclimates or bioregions. So you can do weather forecasting for your area, and it gets very, very precise because of the way that they use these angles. So
Planetary.
I guess yeah, exactly. So the thing being is we've got the presentment of all these planets happening on this one side of the sun, that with all these things going off, and we're seeing it as chaotic. Whereas in actuality, it actually starts seeming, when you start looking at like the evidence that's been presented, it starts looking far more like something that's actually been being monitored, being watched, being recorded for a very, very, very long time. And I think, as Meghan sort of said, the distraction of the fiction or the fake system as opposed to the natural system is what actually makes it really confusing. But yeah, there's so much to add to this as well. It's like, I think the link I just posted up was Galileo, and it's funny because you brought up like, them knowing this stuff, and it was in the 1600s, early 1600s, where Galileo adapted a telescope so that he could start measuring the sunspots and started going, hey, look. And you got to remember that I think it said 1610 is when he started writing about this stuff, and 1611 is when what was released upon the world, the King James Bible. So you got to sort of start wondering whether the King James Bible and the New Testament was that updated astrology in code.
Oh man!
So
this is the thing that is so amazing, and it's the thing that makes us. And Ben, you and I have had this conversation for so many freaking years. When you go in and you study these scientists from the 1800s, these mathematicians from the 1800s, the 1700s, and you realize that they were on it. They had it. They actually had a lot of this shit already figured out. And then all of a sudden, along comes, I don't know, a pile of world wars, along comes Project Paperclip, along comes all of this kind of stuff. And all of that science is buried. I mean, not just buried a little bit, but completely buried. And science does this turn to follow this set path. And it's like, and this is the only truth. This is it. And everything else gets dumped to the wayside. And then 50 years later, 100 years later, we're scrambling to try and find these little tiny old pieces that have been left behind for us to go, no. They fucking had it. They'd already worked out this shit, and they were ignored. For what purpose? Well, obviously there's a purpose. There's always a purpose when all this shit gets ignored. But it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. What video is this, Megan? Megan said, like a video you sent Ben, leak project, where they talked about the ancient Egyptians who had mapped out the piles of Jupiter. Piles of Jupiter? Like mountains or poles? Poles. Okay, sorry. Typo. It's okay, darling. If I'd had half a brain cell, I would have been able to put that one together myself. Right down to the odd measurements in the vortices. Well, this is it. So now we get these little bits that are coming out now, and mainstream science is going, oh, look, Saturn's got this really bizarre magnetic anomaly on it right at the equator, and we just don't know what it's doing there. And of course, then they try to explain it off with this mainstream science crap that just doesn't even make sense. And we're sitting there going, electric universe, man. Like, it's all interconnected. And, like, does anyone else find it funny that we have the exact same magnetic anomaly on our planet, on our equatorial region, at the exact same time?
But it kind of gets funnier than that too, because it's like, even if the Newtonian, Einsteinian physics model has relevance. Not only do we have our great sun there, but we have all these gigantic gas giants that are sitting on the one side of us. Like, we don't have like the sun between us and them anymore. Like,
No,
and
right
that's
there.
got that like, even in gravity, that has to start like
There has to be a correlation.
meaning something.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's like, does a Jupiter plus a Saturn equal a sun? You know, you like
If you
things
talk
like
about,
that.
you know, weight and energy and etc. However, whatever descriptive words, it has to. Like, we're talking massive pulls, and that's what I found it really interesting that the book that you sent the link over to today talked about Uranus, because here again, that was the 74 years, is it, Uranus's orbit? Was it 74 years or 73 years? But that was brought up in the book as the fact that, unfortunately, we're looking at this alignment of Uranus and Jupiter and Saturn and the Earth, etc. But the only way to calculate that cycle was to wait another 74 years to see if that prediction would come true. Now, I would like to know when that 74 years were up, and if someone could go back and look at, for example, the weather patterns, and can they say, yeah, there was a drought here and there were floods over here? They were absolutely correct. They predicted the weather was going to be 74 years later. Jules is coming, but she's like really early in the morning for poor Jules and Ben. Ben's used to getting up at this ridiculous, god-awful hour of the morning. So, okay, yeah, and Megan, you just said Jupiter and Saturn were suns. Well, Jupiter and Saturn were suns. What kind of, dare I say it, weight does that also throw into the mix? When we talk about direct correlations and all the planetary alignments around those. Okay, Megan, is there any way you could unmute? I know you've probably got the kids around you right now, but she's like firing in all these comments, and I'm trying to keep up. Now Ben's on it. And Joanna,
See-
you're not wrong. Old farmers' almanacs probably have versions of this information. You can almost guarantee if you could get yourself a hands on an old farmer's almanac from like the early 1903, 1910. I read one that was from about 1928, 29. It was the farmer's wife's almanac, and it was calling about, okay, well, we know this year is going to be a bumper crop in these plants, so here's what we're going to do with those plants this year. We're going to put them down. This is what the farmers' wives could do to, gather in that crop, because they knew that was coming.
See, and while Australia is in drought, it has just started pouring down here, and it was nice clear blue skies for a second ago. So our bioregion, like we've actually had rain almost constantly for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even joking. Like
when everyone else has got a drought.
Yeah, yeah. So and this is these planetary angles that play out. So in our specific zone, we'll probably find that, like what Megan and Jules and everyone else has been speaking about, is the influence is not such a, obtuse thing. It's actually, it narrows down to such acute natures of basically, them having mapped out our birth charts and created this astrology because of these influences. And that's how kind of important it is, right?
And that's just it. They already figured out how important it was, and to that locality, not just planetary, but like you're saying, to a locality, a specific.
There's another guy from the States. So there's Inigo Jones, who was an actual meteorologist here, and there's another guy who was a farmer called I can't remember his first name, but he goes by W.D. Gans, G-A-N-N-S. And he started off as a farmer. He started looking into these things, and he ended up not only working out the weather patterns and meteorology for planting and stuff like that, but he saw that it adapted to the stock market identically. Yes. And not in the reason that people may think, as in, okay, so he was able to predict the grains going down and therefore invested in that fashion.
Yeah.
He sold and invested prior to all of that stuff because it was going to go down. Like the grains went down because of the planets, the stocks went down because of the planets. Yeah. It's the same as the mapping of these crashes, 1986, 2008, all these things, the French Revolution, they all happen on these markers. And these people, like you say, Dee, is like that book is actually like Inigo Jones, I think, was still around in the like 1960s. I think he died just prior to the great 1974 flood, which he actually wrote about and was like 10 years plus prior going, you guys need to start considering this. And they were like, hush, muck. And then it happened.
They didn't listen. And the floods happened anyways. So Megan's trying to drive home right now. She has to keep pulling over to type text into us. So we're all just telling her, stop typing, just drive fast and get home so you can talk to us.
There you go, Jules. Is just that. So he died in 1955. So he predicted it 30 years out, the 1974 flood. Yeah.
30 years in advance.
So like,
predicted it.
That's how on it these guys were.
When we talk about, we bring up, of course, our crew here, we talk about movies all the time, right? And God, our movie night has been through all of the major Bizarro movies, etc. We talk about movie. Nick and I talked about this just yesterday or the day before. We're again looking at like all this stuff, these tornadoes tearing through, and the snowfall, etc. And the movie The Day After Tomorrow. Now, the interesting thing was, the point that we both brought up was, in the very beginning of that movie, the guy who plays the hero of the movie, who is a meteorologist, he's a scientist who studies, he's not a meteorologist, he's a climate paleontologist, I think he is, climate paleontologist. He had set up a model, and he had set up a model that was going to show this ice age coming. And in his model, it was going to take, I can't remember how many years. I think his model called for it was going to take, Dennis Quaid, 75 years. 75 years, and this is what was going to happen. Well, everything in his model that he had put out and was trying to warn everyone about came true. But it all came true in weeks. It wasn't like 75 years. It was more like over the course of a couple of weeks, it just ramped right through. So you have this stuff that, like for me, I keep coming back up to it and going, when we see this stuff playing out, because really, if you take a broad spectrum look at the weather news over the past months, it is the day after tomorrow. It is the opening scenes of the day after tomorrow. It is hailstorms, the likes of which we've never seen before. It is tornadoes ripping through places where they're not supposed to get tornadoes, when they're not supposed to get tornadoes. These freezing temperatures, etc. Now, Hollywood glorification. Hollywood got to turn it all into a big, ooh, and of course their science is completely fucking wrong because it's all climate change. Regardless, the pieces are there. And I found it very interesting. Like I said, this model that the guy in the movie, Dennis Quaid, talks about in his movie was supposed to have taken, decades and decades to play out, maybe even 100 years, because I can't remember what it was. And it happened in a matter of weeks. Now, the same thing, mainstream science talks about the coming ice age. And they're like, oh, that's not going to happen for another 400 years from now. And even within the, a lot of the pole shift, climate change pole shift community, alternative scientist community, they're also trying to give dates of like, it could happen 70 years from now, 80 years from now, etc. Except that what we're seeing is that there's something. I'm not going to say pole shift because we don't know. But I'm going to say there is something happening, and it's happening right now. It's not 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years from now. It's not going to take 150 years for it to play out. It's happening right now. And I keep going back to the distractions because no one's fucking talking about this shit. Instead, everyone's talking about any distraction they can possibly come up with. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to catch up with the chat here. Yeah, hidden in plain sight, Tony, exactly. Well, this is the whole thing. We're seeing so many of these pieces, and I love to work out the pieces of the puzzle. We all know that that's what Jenny does. She just can't help herself. She has to know the why. She has to know the how. She has to know that's what, which is why I research like I do. But in the end of it, regardless of the how it's happening, why it's happening, etc., the fact that we're seeing it happen, to me, is the most important aspect to comprehend, right? Now, what I find interesting in this new stuff is when we talk about the planetary stuff, these alignments. Can we then predict how it will play out? How what we're seeing now, how will it play out according to these various planets that are moving in and out of prominence, if you will, moving in and out of places where they're becoming very strong influences in certain areas, to the point of what Ben was saying, even down into localities. Now, these guys were able to predict in Australia where floods would happen, where droughts would happen. And I don't mean like Queensland is going to have a drought. No, I mean like this fucking mountain here, that lake, that lake is going to flood. They were able to predict it that way. Can we use that same information now to be able to get an idea of what's playing out now and how it's moving forward? Feel free to jump in here, guys. Seriously. Because the chat's just going off. You guys in the chat are like, holy crap.
So I just discovered Inigo Jones's document, which I sent you and Ben last night at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was jumping out of my skin about it because this was written in 1944, and basically, I've got to bring it up. There's a couple of pieces.
I've got it up, but I can't open it. If I do, I'm going to crash everything.
He actually goes into like the characteristics of the sun, how it's pretty much an inverter, and I know that Ben has said this so many times. So basically projects directly onto Earth, where we are.
Yeah.
But when all the planets are aligned, they kind of ping off each other, right?
Right.
They create connections, magnetic field connections, like water when it's connected, right? And it projects it into the Earth or onto the Earth, however you want to put it. Now, there's one bit that I really want to pull out. Might just have to go back. Sorry, I'm just using my phone because there were some really, really interesting pieces.
Yeah, no. I don't blame you. Like I said, I woke you up at 1 o'clock in the morning with my own jumping up and down going, oh my God.
Okay.
This is shit that they're writing about.
So, yeah, okay. So he says, the universe is regarded as an electromagnetic entity through which eternally circulates the minute projectile known to us as light, which is, however, a small proportion of the whole mass. This mass is imperishable in energy and amount, but is capable of going through a series of conversions from one form of energy to another. But in this process, nothing is lost. So basically, this is the way I'm saying it. With the light, or the angles of the planets, specifically the angles, not so much where they're sitting in the zodiac, astrologically, but astronomically, their poles are creating charges to one another. You've got electric and magnetic charges all over the place. And considering Jupiter has got an electromagnetic field 20,000 times the size of Earth's, can you imagine? Can you imagine what sort of
effect it's got to have?
Effect it's going to have?
So, on that, you saw the water. Did you guys watch that little water doco that I sent you girls? I think.
Did you just watch that one segment and I was like,
so when they put the camera over the two waters, right, and they have a positive anode in one and a negative in the other, and it was creating that water bridge between the two beakers.
It's two beakers that are like yay close together, and the water is right to the top, and they positively charge one and negatively charge the other, and the water is touching. It's actually creating a tiny bridge between the two beakers. So if you can visualize that, like a little tiny water bridge between these two beakers. Go ahead, Ben.
So when they did the magnetic overview, did you see in the water how it was shooting off stuff? So I the reason I sent it, I was like, D, look at this in comparison to these charts that we're looking at on the magnetosphere and the ionosphere. And then, so what you then have is you're seeing these discharges going off. It's like what we're talking about in the chat. What I'm sort of trying to say is like people were talking about like it getting hot and cold, and so temperature is the heat of something. Heat is the either build up or loss of kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is basically the entrapment of vibration that starts vibrating, which makes it kinetic, and then it's either disposed as electrical or magnetic. So where all of this stuff starts fitting in is like, not only is there external influences, but there's internal charge that's being created in that, and it also has. So some of these anomalies that we're starting to see could literally be our planet internally becoming more active, because it is essentially it is a water giant. Yeah, we've got water planets, we've got gas planets, we've got those sorts of things. So I start seeing the 4 elements represented in those planets: fire, air, earth, water, and whatnot. And then the way that they interact and talk. So, like, we've gone from this planet being the only water planet to now the way that they measure the heliosphere is by frozen ice.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like water is literally the glue of the universe. And when you look at the way that water charged in those beakers starts dispelling and it starts becoming ever more present, that we're starting to see this beautiful, like I always picture it like whales talking, except you can't hear the squeaks and beeps. and you're starting to see that representation. So, yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. So you just said the water is the universal water type thing. Nick has got a theory. Nick has had a theory for a lot of years that there's water out there. Like, outer space contains vast quantities of water. And he said, so when you talk about things like, we look at the classical traditional stories. So Noah's flood it's in every culture is written about the Great Flood, etc. Now, where did that water come from? How did enough water just randomly appear to flood the entire planet to the tops of the tallest mountains, so we're told, etc.? Okay. Unless that was charged and drawn in from space. All of a sudden there was a charge flip. And the Earth began drawing in this water from space, wherever it is, whether it's droplets, whether there's entire rivers of water. And that all of a sudden, that was it. Just whoosh. And now all of a sudden you have this charged water that you've been talking about for fucking ever, Ben. The idea. And that's when we watched that thing with the little water droplet bridge. When you watch the interactions, the scientists are sitting going, we have no idea how it's doing this. We have no idea what it's doing. We can't explain the reaction of these water droplets, even remotely. Because they're not looking at it. They're not looking at it. And when I saw that, it was like positive to negative. What if all of a sudden this over here, this charge becomes so strong that it starts pulling the water from the one to the other?
So Bessie's just put in there, water out in space is an easy thing. The sun blows out hydrogen, chuck some oxygen in there, and there you go. And this is it.
Exactly.
So we've spoken about biological transmutation, and that, like, in the late 1800s all the way through the 1950s, they were mapping out the periodic table and how the interactions of those components could create new things on that table from something that they didn't know. Ergo, carbon and oxygen being able to be, time, heat, pressure, whatever it is, biology can create silica, and so on and so forth. So, like, what you guys, what we're sort of dancing around is we live in a universe basically made up of stuff. And as that stuff interacts, it is pretty much as simple as, there's some excess hydrogen which is negatively charged, and then it comes into contact with a certain atmosphere that might have a lot of oxygen in it, and hey presto, you kind of have water. So these influxes, it could be those potentials. ergo the sun is giving out a lot of this, and therefore there is a lot of oxygen, or there's a lot of like CO2 in the air, right? The CO2 rises, it gets a little bit cooler, or it's warmer, or whatever it is, and then these things coalesce and you have massive floods.
Yep. But then we go same thing with the electrical discharge, right? The electrical discharge, this ground lightning, the massive lightning strikes that are happening as well. That is a positive to a negative. This is an exchange of energy that's coming and going back and forth. We look at the magnetic anomalies, right? These magnetic anomalies, exact same kind of thing. We're seeing it happen. We're seeing the crunches happening on the graphs, but we're now seeing it, for example, in someone's physical.
Well, you're also like, you've got to like really got to fathom that you getting hot and cold is experiencing these charges.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at, is temperature is not just you getting hot because of heat. Yeah, it's like we've talked about. If there's more UV light coming through, it doesn't matter whether it's hotter, because that kinetic UV wavelength, when it hits you, builds up as kinetic charge and dispels itself as heat. And heat is also a form of magnetism.
Okay, so just pause there on the magnetism, because that's interesting. The UV though. So for example, I've been trying to lie out and get some sun for the last couple of weeks, the little bit that we have. Last week I laid out on the roof for half an hour. That was all I could handle. It was only 19 degrees Celsius, according to what the thermometer said. But you could feel the ultraviolet. You could feel it burning. And I don't mean heat as in radiant heat that we're used to. You could feel it almost like electricity. That's probably the closest analogy I could give. It almost felt like electricity on your skin. Now, again, if we're talking positive and negative charges, etc., when we look at the ultraviolet, because we know by the numbers there's a lot more ultraviolet light coming in. Would that, in your opinion, Ben, because I just don't know enough about ultraviolet light, if we start talking about charges, could we infer a charge from that? The reactions that we physically experience? I don't know if I'm explaining that right.
So just repeat the question. Well,
if we're feeling, like I said, I felt the sun literally feels like electrical on my skin. Electrical, like that. That's the only sensation I can talk about. Not radiant heat, as in like if you're sitting under a heat lamp, you know what I mean? That like, oh, it feels so lovely and warm on a cold day. It feels electrical. So I'm thinking about charge, and I'm thinking about ultraviolet and charge versus our planet and ourselves.
So how about Bassie, jump in, because I'm trying to read this article that you've posted up. So jump in and
it's basically they found a way to violate the second law of thermodynamics without actually violating it. So they made the impossible possible, that imagine you have a bowl of water that is like just 2 Celsius or 2 degrees over the freezing point. So when they have another bowl of water that is hotter, way hotter than, I mean, not hot, boiling hot, but compared to the other bowl, hotter, right? Like let's say 10 degrees, just for an example. So they moved the 2 degrees that are needed to stay liquid. They move that heat. So I'm not talking about heat in a way like you feel from a fire. That is heat that is moving towards you, that moves literally through space. But there's also a heat we call vibration, right? If you rub your hands fast enough, you feel heat, right? So they move that heat from the colder object to the hotter object, while using currents that are not plus or minus. They change constantly, like oscillating, like, you know, like
Oscillating,
getting plus, getting minus, like almost like Tesla technology. So they literally done the impossible to freeze that bowl while making the other bowl hotter without actually violating it.
And this is it.
I'm so over my head. Like, I'm just like trying to. I'm gonna have to read the article. I'm gonna attempt.
Yeah, Ben, that is basically, that reminded me. That's why I'm basically here, even though my entire life is right now upside down. But I felt the need to come here to tell you this tonight. Because they literally, like you said, we understand some parts of the natural law, but we don't understand how to manipulate it. The people back then did it very, very easy to make easy things going, right? Like, they were not lazy, but they were lazy in a way. Why should I invest all that energy if I can use a natural trick, right?
Interesting.
Exactly. And all essentially they've done is started to disprove the Newtonian, Einsteinian side of things. So it's just outside of their laws, LAWS. Because
but imagine,
this is what we start finding is like when you, go.
But imagine this, the energy that is used in these things is literally so low, it is not even mentionable, because they literally say it is so low it's almost free, right? So imagine now these fuckers have satellites over there that do crazy shit. Like I said in the chat earlier, we had yesterday a tornado in Germany with temperatures below 18 degrees. Only a fucking storm that rained fucking cold water over all Germany, and there was not enough energy mathematically to fuel a tornado. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And so this brings in, when we start talking about longitudinal and latitudinal currents, you see, in a lot of the work we do with some of our people down here, it's really funny, because we have scientists come in that go, we've spent millions of dollars on creating an electromagnet that will levitate a frozen piece of carbon for, like, you know, seconds. And I don't mean like a couple of seconds, like, you know, maybe like a minute and a half or something like that. But they like, and we have people that can do this with normal, just normal ferrite magnets, and it freaks them out.
But imagine the energy you use to get the gases in liquid form to cool that thing down. It is actually like a fuckload of energy you actually use instead of
exactly. And
the heat.
But that's what I'm saying, Bassi. Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. We don't. We just use normal ferrite magnets. We don't add any extra charge. So what happens is we start playing with the longitudinal energy formats, which is what. See. So in that test, they might not, like you're saying, the charges are so minuscule, but there's another electrical field, for lack of better term, or another field that they're actually not measuring. It's like with the slot experiment.
Don't comprehend
that happened.
Even idea that it exists.
Well, they haven't started measuring that yet. It's the same with like where they're sitting there going, oh, we've found a fourth state of water. It's like, no, you've just started measuring there. Yeah. That's all I'm sort of getting at. So even if you're at, like, let's say you're at minus 18, you can still get to minus 30, which is still a loss of heat. But at that point, the microcharge, let's call it, would be like not even milliamps. It probably wouldn't even register as that. It'd be so small.
Still there,
but
right?
Exactly. But they're not. There's the potential for something else to actually be occurring, and that's what we're sort of getting at. Is like what Dee was asking is, like, she was feeling the heat kind of electrical, and that there I can't answer to, because that depends on what stage or what capacity you were actually in. Because let's say you were dehydrated, you might have been feeling it as electrical, whereas if you were hydrated, the water would have absorbed that and you may have felt it as something else.
But that brings up cause and effect. It's just really, really interesting.
No, it's not so. It's charge and discharge. That's what it is. Yeah. So
that just brings up, because the whole conversation we had before we went live talking about dehydration. I am extremely dehydrated right now, and it doesn't matter how much I drink, doesn't matter how much salt I bring in. I'm extremely dehydrated, and in the chat we're talking about it, and a lot of people are saying the same thing. If we are dehydrated, i.e., our water levels, our natural water saturation point in our body is less than it normally would be, and we know that we have this much more electrical discharge happening, could that be, like, is it a cause and effect? As in, because the electrical discharge is going on atmospherically, between our planet, between the atmosphere, between ourselves, because we're on this planet and we're grounding out into this, could that be affect the hydration water levels within our own body?
This is where that kind of woo side of our stories from like a year or so ago come in, which is like, remember we were discussing, it's like, there's hydrogen, there's oxygen, there's nitrogen, there's all these different components. If there is charge going on, and those particles are a format of charge, then yes. See, if there's more positive charge occurring, then the hydrogen's going to get pulled to that. So what we're calling a drought isn't so much a drought, it's a hydrogen deficiency or a terrestrial hydrogen deficiency.
Terrestrial hydrogen deficiency in northern Queensland.
And
so,
could that be also, like, sometimes you have a thunderstorm that knows before the thunder discharges where it hits, right? Like, you can have a field, let's say a plain field with all the unfuckers, everyone is the same height, and the lightning knows already before it hits the ground where it wants to discharge. But sometimes you have those lightnings that rather discharge in the air from one cloud into another instead of grounding itself, right?
Yes. So in that aspect, and what this is where it kind of gets a kind of a little weird, but not. So the lightning is the after effect of something. It's not the thing that's happened. So all you're seeing in
right?
Yeah. So most lightning that you see hitting the ground has already left Earth and shot off, and then as it's made its connection, the neurons fucking shit is electrified and gives off light. So it's the after effect. So when you see a cloud going from a cloud to a cloud, that is atmospheric. It's not from the Earth. Those two. So then those two clouds, if you picture that into Velikovsky's work, and that's two planets. One's positive, one's negative, for lack of better terminology. And they're discharging through each other. So they haven't got a point on the Earth that needs it. So they're just doing it between each other. Then if the Earth needs to, you won't see anything. And then you'll see once it makes its connection, it then lights up.
Yeah.
So that's exactly like, and that's the thing is, so you can have a storm that's got dastardly clouds, but no rain, but it'll shoot lightning. And so instead of rain being the discharge, the lightning is the discharge. It's just like you were just saying in Germany you had that tornado. So this rain that just came over before here was cold, like really cold, probably 4-degree cold, which means it was pristine water being dropped, because yesterday we had a hot day. So in my world, I go, well, the Earth got heated yesterday, the mist went up, and as soon as it got too heavy, the Earth was hotter than those clouds. So the water fell because of the discharge.
Yep.
It didn't rain, the water just fell. So now we've got blue skies. And so there's the discharge. So the Earth is now cool, so it's negatively charged, and there's no need for it to be discharged now, so the sun opens up, which is the positive.
Okay, so I want to get back into this dehydration thing because the conversation over here in chat is just going crazy, and it's been really, really interesting because everyone's chiming in going, oh my God, yeah, I'm still so dehydrated. And the symptoms of not just dehydration within ourselves, but of dryness. So I was talking about my skin is dry, my kids' lips are cracking the way they used to in the middle of winter in Toronto when you were in that central heating day in and day out, and your skin and your lips would get so dry. It feels like that. I'm in an island in the Mediterranean where in the wintertime, the walls run with water. It is that fucking damp. We don't have that right now. People are talking about shocks, getting electrical shocks. And someone was just saying Pamela just said the water coming out of the faucet gave her a shock. So we talked about the shocking, for example, during about 2 months ago when I was talking about all the ground lightning and all the discharge. I was like, is anyone getting shocked? And everyone was talking about this.
Just quickly on that, so remembering some of our conversations we've had is like the milk industry, the dairy industry, and also the fire brigades use certain stainless steel and certain stainless steel connectors because the speed of the water and or liquids traveling through those pipes created so much static charge that the facilities themselves were killing people because the build-up in the pipes, not because they were electrified, and essentially it comes down to the amount of carbon that's in those steels. Of course, carbon being the great storer, if there's extra charge and extra carbon, then the carbon's going to store it as energy, and then it will discharge depending on how it needs to. So if it gets a build-up and someone touches it, you're the shortest way to Earth. but then remember, it's not so much coming out of the steel. It's the Earth needs the charge. So you're feeling the electrocution is actually you feeling the effect. Do you see, and you see how it correlates between either the clouds zapping each other or zapping the Earth? It's like you were just in the spot that the Earth needed that charge, and it took it from that pipe via you. Using you as a conductor. You feel it as the electric shock. See, this is how interconnected.
Say again, Ben. This is how interconnected
everything is.
Yeah.
Sorry, you mean me?
Like how highly interconnected.
No, I was talking to Ben Bossy.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay, hon.
Yeah. So yeah, like that's what it is. That's why you can get a shock off of a door handle or walking on the carpet. It's not just the build up. It is exactly that. It's the build up, but it's the release. You're in the right spot for the release to happen. So when you you used to do the thing and you rub your jumper and you go and electrocute your mate, they needed that. You've incurred it, but they were lower in charge or lower in frequency than you, and that's universe balance, and that's universe balancing. So in a strange way, the electric shock is you and you, Earth and universe
having a tug of war.
Well, harmonizing.
Pamela, so why the tap water shock? My theory, going beyond the positive charges, etc., and the stuff that Ben's talking about, is the fact of a lot of the pipes that are under the ground are metal. They're copper pipes. They're metal pipes. And if we have all this massive amount of electricity charging, discharging, i.e. the lightning, the ground lightning, etc., all these other things that we're experiencing, if that's running through the water pipes, it just has to be just the right connections, as Ben is saying. And you're the connection that grounds it.
Yeah.
And boom, there's the charge from the water.
Charge is built up. Water is a massive conductor.
Yes.
In essentially, it's the highest magnetic conductive thing that we know. And we know how highly electrically conductive it is.
Yeah, but,
you know,
but aren't those pipes literally over the years of huge usage not clogged with like what is it called in English, like chalk, the white stuff when you boil water that
It
stays in the
depends.
ground?
It depends on the water that's
Like,
running through them.
no.
Yeah, but minerals.
What I'm trying to say is the water flows through the pipe. It is isolated to a degree, but when it comes out of your faucet and you touch it, it discharges because it could not discharge within the pipe where it flows,
Yeah.
right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's interesting, Bossy. That's interesting. Yep.
Well, that's that. Like, so bring it back. The Earth didn't need the charge. It's not that it can't. It just didn't. You and your spot and position needed it. You were the shortest path for that build up to get through. It's not just an electric shock happening. So like with an electric fence, like an electric fence is electrified and it's contained within that field until something touches it, and then it's giving the extra via you.
Yeah.
So what I would almost say is electrocution isn't you getting killed because of you being electrocuted. It's actually pulling more energy out of you than you have.
Well, and it also depends on where you're standing, right? I mean, that's if you're in the grounding gear, i.e., for example, you know, when you go to the science center when you were a kid, there was the big, huge ball, and you stand on the special platform, and you'd put your hand on it, and the electricity would go right, and your hair would stand all the way out, because it's conduiting through you. It's not.
And well, you're also
grounding into you.
Well, you're also getting the difference between DC and AC.
Yeah.
Because of the pulse pause in AC, the positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, confused, whereas DC is continuous. There is just a constant flow. So what happens is when you touch that ball, it goes out through your hair, and that's actually showing you your body going out into your locale and showing you the charge. Yeah, so it's not electrocuting you because it doesn't need to ground. It's natural energy. AC shifts. DC is continuous. You can hold on to DC and it will just flow. It doesn't need to discharge. It's not got a positive and then negative and it's going, oh, where am I going? It's just universe.
It's just flowing.
Yeah, so your hair going up like that is just you flowing. In charge. Yeah?
Okay, slightly off topic. Not really. Actually, very off topic. We'll get back to it. Oh my God, what did you just post? Bossy, you just posted, I don't know what the hell that was, but it's like...
Sorry. That was just a fucking fucked up Googling.
No, don't worry. Stephanie just said, all this talk about Uranus made me remember something my grandma told me when I was 10 years old. She said that Uranus is very important and we need to learn stuff about it, but they named it that so no one would take it seriously. She was the crazy lady in my family, so I was always told to ignore the weird shit she said, but now I'm curious. Yeah, I'm fucking curious too. Like when you hear people say this kind of stuff, because I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. What did we tell you when you talk about the planet Uranus? Every school kid goes, you said Uranus. It's true. Hell, it's even in this house. In my house, regularly, if anyone says the word Uranus, everyone bursts into laughter and starts making butt jokes. So, yeah. Laura just asked, how did Tesla survive electrocuting himself? I think that comes down to the AC and the DC. Does it not? Again, alternate because it wasn't. It was direct current. It wasn't alternating current. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to scroll down. You guys, again, the chat's just like going fucking off. I'm trying to keep up with everyone now. Okay.
It's actually the other way around, Danny. It was AC. Tesla did AC.
Sorry, yeah, I knew it was one or the other. I get them confused. Megan, are you home yet? Or are you stopping and typing again? because she just put a comment in here, and you're home. Do you have a second? Can you come on and talk about this? Because you made the comment in our private chat about the major planets and the gods, the four main gods that they represented, and the whole thing that Uranus is like the mythological Hades, not Uranus, who's the father of Kronos, right? Okay, and that's really, really fucking interesting. Okay, she's just gonna grab her headset. I'd like make her drive for an hour home from work and like, get on the fucking show, hurry up, woman. Clive, we're really, really fortunate that we have three amazing astrologers in our group here. Megan's one, Jules is another. Amina's not here tonight because she's sleeping. It's like the middle of the night for her. But if you want to backtrack, because I know you haven't been around for a bit, we've done several astrology shows that have been really fucking good. Because we're talking about, basically, it's not just woo-woo shit, it's electric universe stuff. This is talking about direct connections between the planets and how it plays out, which is what this conversation tonight is really started off about. And Mercedes as well, and we've got Mercedes as well, who's also an astrologer. So we got a really good crew when it comes down to being able to ask these kind of planetary questions. Megan, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Ben had sent me a video a couple days ago from the Leak Project, and they had touched on some really interesting planetary points in there. One of the things that they had talked about was the ancient Egyptians and how they had the poles and the vortices of Jupiter completely mapped out, and it wasn't like a perfect octagon. So the probability of this happening with all the odd angles were pretty, it wasn't a fluke that they did this. So they got really talking into the ancient myths about specifically Jupiter and Saturn. And they brought up some really interesting points that set off some pings for me. And I haven't finished researching into it. And I'm not really sure where it's going to go. But it was interesting that they brought up two things. One was that Uranus was misnamed. And the other one is about Saturn transitioning into Hera. So they bring up the four planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, which when you go into the stuff that Jules and Ben were talking about, those are the four planets they say to watch, this Indigo Jones guy. So then you go into the ancient myths where they talk about Saturn being our old sun. So Kronos, who was born of, Uranus, which was the sky. So then you have Cronus the Titan, who ate all his kids, and then he's usurped by Zeus, and then he's castrated. And Uranus was castrated too. So you always have these male godhead figures that are castrated when they're upheaved. But then is that just them talking about a pole flip from magnetic or electric into magnetic, male into female? Because
no, that's really interesting because that was the
yeah,
place my mind went to.
Yeah, and if you think about it,
he's laughing
male, yeah, like male energy, electric, like they're all personified by the gods, and you have the magnetic, which is female, which is the goddesses. So who is the one that hounds Zeus all the time? It's Hera.
It's Hera.
It's always Hera, and she's always got a problem with his progeny, and she's kind of like, that limiter, like that nagging wife, like zipping around, wagging her finger and chasing down all his little like bastard children. And so it's just interesting that they compared Saturn to after he fell, Kronos, after he fell and was castrated. Well, then he switches polarity into the female Hera. And then they talked about how Uranus could potentially have been misnamed. You don't really hear too much about Uranus in the Greek myths, only that he was pre-Titan. He was like a primordial deity. He's the sky. So Kronos is the product. Kronos is space. So space is the product of, time and place. Area. Rhea, the mother, is Area.
Huh.
And then Uranus is the sky, right? So then you have the product, which is time, Chronos. So time is born of time and place. Or, anyway, so then he gets disposed by Zeus, which is the sun, and they posited that it at one point was close enough that either we had really, really good telescopes or we could actually see it with our eyes close enough to map it out. And then they talk about the potential that Uranus is actually Hades. The Pluto archetype planetary, it's very transformative. It's about, it's what's going on right now with Saturn and like everything being, broken apart to be restructured in our society. That doesn't really fit with Uranus, if you think about it. Uranus energy, it's very electric. So again, it's the sky, it's the thunderbolt thing. So that makes me question, was it misnamed? I don't know, like there's something to that, and I'm just wondering what Jules would think about that and what Ben has thought about that, because Hades is the banished brother. He's beyond the rings of Saturn outside of, because Saturn also represents the limits of our view. So anything outside, I don't know, it's there's something to it, but I'm not 100% sure where to wrap my mind around it. So if there's any unfuckers that this is painting anything for anybody,
we've got to take into context as well that this cycles themselves. How long comes around?
Say that again, Ben.
Meghan?
How long? What?
How long is Pluto's transit?
it takes 12 years to go around. Oh, did you say Pluto?
Pluto.
Pluto. Sorry, I'm looking at notes I was reading about Jupiter.
It's,
Pluto's like
248.
Yeah, 248.
248. So that's like 250 years. So close. It's kind of like I posted up something about the bamboo in Japan that's starting to flower. Right? It only flowers every 100 years. Now, I started wondering, is it exactly 100 years, or is it closer to, what was it, Jules, the planet that you put up, was it whatever it was, I think, was it Uranus, 125, 125 years?
I think bamboo's ruled by Pluto, astrologically, and I think it's like a half orbit. So Pluto's 248 years, and I think the Japanese bamboo has been flowering after 124 years, 125. So it appears to be a half orbital period.
So here we have cosmological botany at play, is what I'm sort of going by. So when you start looking at the gods as allegory for the planets, or vice versa, Pluto being Hades, that thing that no one ever sees twice or once even in their life, or even once, right? So you got to think about the aspects.
Uranus is Hades, and that's Uranus is 84 years. Did you guys say, guys? '84. Yeah, I remember. So same thing though, but 84 years, meaning it could be once in your life. Probably pretty rare for someone to have Uranus come by twice in their life.
So in those aspects, it then would become very interesting in what civilization or societal structure that came round. So it's like, was hell spoken about in Greek and prior to? Was it? Or was it missed every 5 generations because no one lived past 84 years or 125 years or 200 and so then we've got to correlate these sorts of aspects of them as well.
Hold on, I just want to back up here because someone was just saying something. Oh my god, I've lost it. Moksha asked, Megan, is Uranus connected to our electrical issues on Earth? That's what we were talking about in the last show. Because you said Uranus, you guys were talking about the fact Uranus is very electrical. It was Uranus, wasn't it? I'm sure it was. I don't know if Jules has had to jump away to go deal with her dog. And I don't know where Megan's gone. Oh, there's Megan. Okay.
Sorry, I was just looking in the chat. I noticed something that Marseille just put about Pluto and Persephone and Hades. It's interesting if you look at the traditional Pluto glyph, not just the little PL symbol, but the actual, it's very similar to Venus with a crown. I wonder if just say there is some misnaming happening. What if the Pluto archetype actually fits Persephone more because it's a feminine symbol? And it's the ruler of Scorpio, which is a feminine energy.
But you,
I don't know.
but
There's definitely some things that it was easier to say that than type it. Sorry.
Just think about Pluton, right? Like that was the god of the underworld, right? That ruled or was the god of death, right? In the Greek mythology. No. I'm not talking about not Hades, but
Okay.
Pluton, wasn't it like they called plutonium after the god of death, right? Like after the gods of god of the underworld, so to speak.
But see, so, in astrology, those goddesses and gods are the Roman gods, but they are based on Greek gods. So
Exactly.
we have the confusion with the Greek names and the Greek mythology. So Hades might be Pluton in Roman or in Greek. You know? So, and the myth with Persephone is that she was caught by Pluton, Hades, and dragged into the underworld. But her mother, which was Demeter, missed her too much. And all the vegetation went barren. And therefore, someone, I don't remember quite well now how, they pledged Pluton to give her her daughter back. So Persephone came half a year to her mother, and the rest of the year she had to come back to Pluton, and therefore we have the seasons.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
Life and death.
Jules just said for literally centuries there were only 7 planets until Uranus was discovered in 1781. There's a lot of conjecture about the rulerships and archetypes on the 3 outer planets. And that's where it gets really, really interesting, because when we talk about things like the ancient culture, so things, the ones that had huge astrology and astronomy understanding and comprehension, they didn't know that there was a planet named Pluto out there, and yet, and I think it was the Maya. I was just reading something about it in the last couple of weeks. But they made, what's the word I want to use? They made correlations in their measurements, saying there has to be one there, and they knew where it was. They couldn't see it. They had no, but they had the data of what it was and what it represented, etc. I don't know if I've made that make sense. I'm sorry, guys. I got a wild moment.
They could measure the influence.
Yes,
See,
thank you.
this is the thing: is we only had 7 planets in our solar system, and I think that was potentially when the Earth was still flat, kind of thing. So these, and that's where we've been starting to go with these discussions in regards to were these influences or places or names such as Hera or Pluton and that sort of thing, were there influences these actual planets coming around? And then because of the masculine and feminine attribute, all gods and all the planets, even though they've been personified, the actual influences of them have been measured for a long, long time. So this is, I mean, the crux of, like I say, I've got an unstable connection. The crux of everything is like, as we've sort of spoken, it's like there were tribal people that were able to breed male and female children depending on solar flares and sunspots.
Yeah,
But they didn't have telescopes.
exactly.
See, Galileo started looking at the sunspots and solar flares in the 1600s, but prior to that, there were still things kept in songlines and storylines and myths and legends that are actually about these things. So then one has to start wondering whether or not the attributes and the different names, whether they're masculine or feminine, were actually only visible in certain time periods. So the Greeks, you know, let's say they were around for X amount of time, they may not have had anyone alive that stayed alive long enough to go, oh, there's that influence. So they missed Uranus, they missed Pluto, they missed those things for potentially like centuries, potentially. So this is where the electric universe and thunderbolts of the gods and things come into play, because they're trying to correlate a lot of these things, and one of the things they've left out of their correlating is the potential for the different periods to have only seen different things. Like, if you take into context when they sit there and they say, oh, the lifespan of people was only 34 years, or people only lived to like 50 years old. If that went on for 500 years, then no one saw half the planets at all, or their influences. And then by the time they were coming back round to fully influence things happening on Earth, everyone was like, oh shit, what the fuck's going on? Da 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 da. And then there was a bit of balance where they were like, oh, look, there's Uranus and Pluto again. We keep forgetting to add those into our equation. And then something goes, you know, so these are the different contexts that we've really got to take into consideration.
Well, the same thing of going back to that whole thing we were talking about the book at the very beginning, when they're talking about, you know, weather forecasting and et cetera. And when they were looking at those cycles, they were saying, oh, well, you know, this cycle here, we know Uranus plays this role, but, you know, we're going to predict, but our next prediction will be 84 years from now. Well, that relies that someone ahead in the future will put the notate of what this one guy who's put it all together has said and predicted will happen, and 84 years later has gone, hey, look, this guy was right on the money. So now we have the second or third or fourth cycle. So now we can actually derive from that information that this is completely accurate. But you have to hope that in the future there is that person sitting there looking for that prediction to actually play out.
Denny, let's keep in mind right now we have the technology to write something down on paper that gets is readable for so and so many years. With digital technology, we don't know when the next EMP hits or not. We have people that know stuff right now, right? Like just like, when was it, on the 18th, I saw a German guy, a YouTuber, came from nothing, made a video about how every party is a fucking goddamn liar, right? Like, it got so viral over here in my hemisphere that they just today started a campaign against that guy. But I don't want to derail it in that direction, but the idea is you have these people back then, like Ben said, you had people that lived only 50 years, but we had time spans over here in Europe. Let's think about the 30-year-long war over here in Europe that raged, where you had people that married within 15 years old, had children when they were in their 20s and died when they were in their 30s. You know, you have these I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt again, but you have these time spaces where you have so much action and so much incredibly well-minded people in such a short time span where you what you don't have today. Today is the time span is very long. You can't keep information away like you could before, right?
Though. Okay, but you can. That's what my point was. These guys had the information. They wrote it down. Their books are still available.
Yes, but it were books. But how long did you have people that can actually read?
It doesn't. You've had people been able to read for a couple of hundred years, darling. It's okay.
Yes, for a couple of hundred years, right? But most of the...
Regardless, the information was there. It was buried. It was
exactly.
buried.
It was buried.
It doesn't matter if it's
exactly.
digital information, because we look at Google's burying digital information right now.
Not only Google, YouTube, Facebook is doing it live right now.
If I can just interject quickly. See, when we look at these cycles, it's like someone woke up and built a pyramid, and then the sand, or built a sphinx, and then the sand buried it. See, if we take like the astronomical precision and the calculations and the stuff, it's like Graham Hancock and these guys and Anthony West and Val and all these other people have been, Robert Schoch have been pushing, is like everything is pointing to this thing. It's like in I can't remember, it might have been the ancient archaeology on, you know, the History Channel or something. And one of the questions that archaeologists were like, why would they build it to an alignment? And one of the representations was, I think it was the Hoover Dam. And the Hoover Dam, the way that they constructed it is they built in the Orion constellation as it stood when it was built.
Yeah.
So why would you do that? So the recordings are there. We're stuck on, oh, they were all primitive. How could they have this, that, the other? It's like, motherfucker, they left goddamn mountainside structures.
Maps to show you exactly
built to these things.
Yep.
Just in case the time came when everything went to shit and one of these cycles knocked fucking out of kilter. It was still there.
Yeah.
It was still there.
Yeah.
It's still there. It's still there.
And the other thing too to think about is, like, I feel that all of this information was in the Library of Alexandria.
Oh, no doubt.
And they had it all. You know, it's underground in the 50 miles worth of storage they've got. So it's just like they just take it away.
And that's what I'm saying.
You know?
It's buried, right? So this is the whole thing. I mean, I've said that about the Library of Alexandria as well. You know, it wasn't just burned to the ground and taken away. You know that all these, for example, even in modern times, we're looking at the Middle East, we look at, like, you know, the Al-Qaeda destroying monasteries and destroying old temples. Now, you know that all that shit is being taken away and copied first, etc., etc., and then it's allowed to be destroyed. And the Vatican has all that shit. You know that the entire archives and Library of Alexandria is probably in the Vatican right now. Yeah, caves in the
one day soon in the near, and one day soon in the very near future, in a galaxy not so far away, human beings will wake up and realize that we have some ancient cultures that didn't have fucking libraries to burn down. And these stories, these allegories that are kept in the Bible that they took from these peoples to hide from us in such documents,
yep,
are now coming out and going, hey, this is what's going down. This is what's going on. And we can ignore them for as long as, you know, we feel fit and go, oh, fucking shitty politicians, oh, goddamn geoengineering. Or we could go, right, the stars are talking. He's back. It's going down. It's time. And rather than arguing about the nuances, which is my new favorite word, that are transpiring, we can actually start looking at what the fuck is going on and going, right, instead of going, oh, they're doing this or they're doing that, or it's like, hey, mum's talking, dad's back, shit's going down, wake the fuck up, there's no more phenol. Sorry, that was my bit of a rant, but like I say, it's like heat, cold, positive, negative, electricity, magnetism. It is really that simple.
Have you guys heard about the huge find that they supposedly found in Jordan, where they found Cleopatra's tomb with Alexander the Great being buried together? And
I
they
heard,
found a third
but
of
then
the,
nothing.
Yeah, it was.
Like, it was all like, oh!
Coast to Coast just had, I think it was in March, an interview with Ann Bolter, I think is her name, but they said they found a third of the Library of Alexandria as well as the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah.
I'll have to post that link to that video.
If you can find the link to that video, I definitely want to put that in there and take a little listen to that. That's interesting. That's very
interesting.
interesting.
Goes into a little bit about why she thinks it's not like taking off like wildfire, that it actually has been discovered.
Huh. There you go.
Probably has to do with the Ark of the Covenant, because they're very, if it concerns the Ark of the Covenant, they get very secretive, don't they?
Well, like I said, I'm still pretty convinced that the Ark of the Covenant was in Yemen, and that was one of the main reasons for the Yemen war, the start of it anyway. But that's old history. I'm not going to get into all that because that just takes us all way offside. Well, guys, that's about it for us for tonight. I know we're a few minutes early. I got a whopping pounding headache at the moment. Sunday night is Fringe night. And next Wednesday is, of course, the next UnFuckIt discussion. That's about it for us for tonight. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Bye. Bye out there in Twitch land.
That's one small step for man.